Good morning. Can you hear me all right? Yeah? We're good to go then. I'm going to talk to you this morning mostly about homelessness. The 18th century writer, campaigner, and great advocate of women's rights, Mary Wollstonecraft, was once described by a politician of her time as being a hyena in petticoats. I have so far only been described by a right-wing politician here as possibly the toughest person he knows, but I remain hopeful of a more colourful and creative description. As I thought about today, I considered the Commonwealth Charter, and I thought to pick up on a couple of areas, namely the core values that acknowledge the need for shelter and for respect. A concern also for the vulnerable and also for young people. As a writer, it seems you occupy a privileged and sometimes useful position in that you can offer a perspective that is to some degree neutral. We make our own hours, and this is helpful for allowing you to wander about and observe the culture, the people, and the buildings that you live beside. I can write all night and then sleep a little in the day, and then walk about whichever place I live and observe its daily rhythms. And in London, I walk miles and miles. I come across people, I sit and chat with them a while. I notice the busy commuters rushing by and the ever-increasing workloads and pressures they are under mean that they rush by a little faster and a little faster. Beside the writers, another group of observers related. And they're a group of people that we call homeless. I would rather be inclusive and think of all city dwellers, for we do all dwell, whether we are housed or not. And I would rather think of them as something not as homeless, because it is a term that is too loaded. It implies so many things which are for the most part untrue and unkind. It also serves to isolate this group of people. And I would rather be, as I say, inclusive. We all dwell in this urban labyrinth, and we all have the right to do so, whether we own a property or not. And I cannot think that a person's right to respect should diminish with their position on the property ladder. I prefer simply to think all of us in the city as urban nomads. That way the homeless are not beneath me, but rather my equals, citizens with rights. And so I'm interested in the present condition of those who live without an official dwelling, our attitudes towards them, and attitudes that are changing as our cities change. Anti-human architecture covers many areas, from questioning how we build out of human scale with our skyscrapers. A lot of them end up just being redundant. I'm not sure what they symbolize anymore. And how we build problems for the future in our cruel prison designs. But I'm mostly interested today in looking at the increase in anti-human design in public spaces and in the management and policing and guarding of such spaces, which seems to be moving rapidly away from democratic use to an authoritarian policing of space. Examples of this include new park designs with seats and benches that are uncomfortable to sit on for very long. This is done deliberately to discourage certain urban nomads, previously called the homeless, from sleeping there. Bus shelters are now, rather ironically, designed not to offer shelter, lest anyone should shelter there. This again includes seating that you can sit on not for very long because it's sloped, in order that you don't do so. After a while, the lower back aches or if there is too much strain on leg muscles. You certainly could not lie down upon one. Let me bring us to a lovely quote by Winston Churchill, given in his address to the Architectural Association, I believe in 1924. There is no doubt whatever about the influence of architecture and structure upon human character and action. We build, we make our buildings, and afterwards they make us. There is nowadays active policing and policy, and councils make areas of public use unattractive and largely not usable by humans. The most obvious example of this has been the addition of anti-human spikes placed strategically to prevent people from sitting in certain areas, targeting deliberately the urban nomads who face rough sleeping so that they may not sleep, may not lie in a doorway under a ledge, so that they may not have shelter. And with the increase of private ownership has come a move towards guarding and policing these buildings, places of work, and big businesses at night. Are we modelling ourselves, I ask, on the right examples? What this has led to in some countries is that guards are then made responsible for ridding the area of these nomadic sleepers. They are, in some cases, encouraged to use non-verbal violence. And the homeless face beatings. Our attitudes, perhaps our understanding, those without formal dwelling, needs to change. Perhaps we should know them that way to appreciate and respect them. If our architecture and the management of space alters our character, as Churchill suggests, perhaps we should take some strides and quickly to alter that space, to legislate against the use of anti-human elements, the spikes, the alteration of steps recently by some councils, so that young people cannot gather, sit there and chatter. Why would you not want young people to gather together and chatter? Let us create spaces rather that are open and fluid, where everyone is welcome, where people can indeed gather and idle, where they might sit and conceive some great new idea, where they might chat with a person from another land that they might not already have met, or an elderly person, or another person without a dwelling. For we do not need to enter a time of intolerance. I spent an entire day once on the London Underground, quite deliberately, taking photographs for a project. I was 8 hours underground, wandering around. And finally, I came across a man who was on the train platform, but he didn't get on a train. His clothes were ripped. His head was shaved. He did not look undernourished. He looked physically strong. But he was not strong. He was suffering. I waited quite a long time, and then finally approached him, realizing that he was choosing his moment to go under a train. It turned out that he was a returned soldier. He had just come back from Afghanistan. He was clearly suffering from post-traumatic stress. His wife had left him. He could not take a job because he could not cope. He was officially homeless and felt useless and desolate. I stayed with him for quite a while and eventually persuaded him to come to a park with me, an old park that has not yet been redesigned so that people wouldn't like to sit there. And I chatted through what he might go through in order to receive the appropriate kind of help. We need to understand people's backstories, how they come to be in difficulties. It is very rare that there is anyone that is truly lazy. I think it is unheard of that anyone would make themselves homeless, though the British government likes to think that this is a possibility. It really isn't. People are strong and vital. They want to work. They want to live as everybody else lives, but they encounter difficulties. There are architects and urban planners capable of designing places that are for the human, quite a normal way. In some areas of the country, they even plant systems of gardens with very spiky plants, again, so that the homeless do not sleep in such places. But it's possible to plant something like evergreens that smell of honey for 4 months of the year. And I imagine if I was homeless, I would rather like to sleep with the scent of honey around me. You drift off to sleep with that scent. You have no fear of being beaten by guards because we don't have that system anymore. Might you not return to better health if your city treated you in a kinder way? If you are constantly in fear of beatings and being ill-treated, or having the box dwelling that you live in removed by the police because it is considered rubbish, I imagine it will take a great deal longer for you to return to the rest of society. Recently, I passed a young man new to street dwelling. He had a cardboard sign next to him. It asked for nothing. It simply read, "Don't worry, I don't bite." I think that if we want to look back without shame, it's time to take down a few more walls and barriers, to pull out the spikes, and to plant the city with honey-scented evergreen. There is a fabulous book that has been written by Anna Minton called Ground Control, Fear and Happiness in the 21st Century. And I urge anyone interested to perhaps have a look at it. It is full of wonderful solutions for city dwellers. But in this particular age of huge and genuine fear that we live in, I can say for certain that the thing that we should not be afraid of are the urban nomads or their boxes. Thank you for listening. I completely agree with you. I think instead of having a government that just awarded itself a 10% pay rise, I would like to have seen a government that took a 40% pay cut and showed a little humility. Thank you. I think we need a little more social cohesion again, don't we? And that's deeply, deeply lacking. It's funny, there was one case where I came across a temporary homeless man who was actually a home owner. I attended an event in a posh area of London in Mayfair, and I was coming home quite early. It was about 8:30, and I came across a mid-60s British gentleman in an extremely expensive suit who was so full of alcohol he had not room for breath. He fell on his knees ahead of me, and I rushed to his assistance. I helped him to the side, and in that area of London there were no spikes yet, so I could place him somewhere where he could actually sit. I asked him could he get home, and he said he thought he could not. He was thanking me for my help. I asked could he afford a taxi if I could hail one. He said he could. He lived in Buckinghamshire, again an expensive place to live. But he said he thought he might rest this evening in the place I had helped him to. And I was touched by the irony of this. He was, in essence, that evening, without dwelling. He was, in a sense, a trespasser because he is a homeowner. These people are the same people. The young man who is on the street, the soldier, the wealthy businessman who has a home in Buckinghamshire, they are all the same person. They are all me. They are all you. And we have to stop discriminating against people who fall on difficulties, whether it's for one night, for 5 nights, or for several years.
Again,